In Chapter 3, we're learning about the very, very important topic of procedures and functions. For right now, we are working with procedures. Procedures and functions are essentially the same thing. The only difference between them is that a function will return a value back, whereas a procedure just does some operations and doesn't give anything back to the original calling program. So I want to go through and look at some more complicated procedures, and also talk about the concept of a local variable versus a global variable. So, remembering how interpreters handle procedures, the interpreter comes in, starts on the first line, reads in the author as Cook, doesn't really do much with that, just identifies the author. We'll look at the definition for the first procedure, which is print plural. We'll check it for any kind of errors in terms of syntax or other errors. Syntax means that you type something incorrectly, like you forgot to put a colon on the end of your procedure or something like that. We'll come down, check this procedure again for different kinds of errors. Not seeing any, it will then come down to the main part of the program and start to execute. So in this case, we set the variable x equal to dog, the variable y equal to cat. These are known as global variables because these are in the main part of the program. Then we call print plural with x. So we're calling print plural print plural. Should have named it something else with the variable x. So in this case, if you think about how memory is set up, out in the memory on your computer, you have space reserved for x, and in that space is stored the word dog. We call print plural, and we come up here and we see that print plural has a definition with a parameter. That's what we call this thing, a parameter, and you can have more than one. We'll see that in the next part of this. In this case, the parameter is called s. So now a new space in memory is declared for s, and in this case it gets the value dog. Now we come inside here and we have a variable, the variable y from down here is a global variable. We're redeclaring that. In Python you have to redeclare global variables just to make sure that you want to use it as global inside the procedure. So in this case there's no new memory allotted. This y is the exact same y as this y. And y was already allotted memory when we were working in the main part of the program. Then we come down to the next line and we see x again. This x, and see, you get a little marker here saying shadows name x from outer scope. That means it's giving us a warning. Say, hey, you've used the variable x twice, but in this case, x is going to be created as a new piece of memory and get its own chunk of memory, and this is a different x from this x down here. We haven't declared it to be global, so inside this procedure, this x is considered a local variable. Okay, so x, we take the string s, which we've passed in as a parameter, and we concatenate or add an s onto the end of that string. And then we do the same thing with a global variable y, and then we print the local version of x inside print plural. Okay, then we have another procedure, print twice, which just prints plural, whatever parameter you pass it, s twice. Okay, so what's going to happen here? We're going to call print plural with x. That's going to get passed into s. We're going to declare a new variable inside print plural. It takes that s, which now has the value, it's a string dog, and concatenates an s onto it. So now it's x, this local x is dogs. Y also has an s concatenated onto it, so it becomes cats, and then we print out x. So we're going to print out dogs. Then we're going to print twice, which is going to call print plural twice. So we should get two more dogs printed out. And then we're going to print out x and we're going to print out y. In this case, this print x is printing out this variation of x, the one that was originally declared, and so we should get dog. The question is, what are we going to get in y? So let's see. I'm going to go up here to, no, I don't have this ran yet. So I'm going to run this program, local versus global. And what do we get? So we get a dogs from print plural x that prints that out. Then we call print twice, which builds on the print plural function. Once we have this function up here, we can use that function down here. So we call that twice, and it prints out dogs twice. Then after we do print twice, we come down to print x, which prints out the original version of x. It is unaffected by what happens up here. As soon as print plural is done with its operation, so we call print plural down here, it prints off dogs. As soon as that is finished, all the code for that print plural is wiped out. So this variable x is gone, and in fact so is s. They don't exist anymore. The y sticks around because it was defined as global and continues to be that y. So we get this variable dog, but what happens down here with cats? Why do we have 3 s's on the end of cat? Well, the answer is we call print plural once, which appends an s onto the end of the string y, but then we call print plural again twice. And each time we call it, because we've defined y to be a global variable, y now has, when we call here the second time, y is already equal to cats with a single s. So if we put another s on it, it becomes cats with 2 s's. And then when we call it the third time, it becomes cats with 3 s's. So the point is, you have to be a little careful about using global variables. It can have unintended consequences, and most programmers tend to avoid using global variables if they can. We tend to stick with local variables so that things like this do not happen. Okay. I also wanted to point out that it's possible to use more than one parameter when you're defining a function. I've done a few things in here. First of all, I've done the import math, which we've seen before, which allows me access to some basic math commands. Because I've done import math instead of from math import star, remember the difference? I'm going to have to use math dot whatever I want to call. I've also made some comments in here to describe what my function is going to do. In this case, what I'm going to do is take the velocity of a car and the diameter of its tire and figure out how many rotations it makes in an hour. So to do that, I've called this function, or procedure, sorry, not a function, procedure, number of tire rotations. It takes in a velocity and the diameter of the tire. The velocity is in miles per hour, the diameter is in inches. So this is just to illustrate the fact that you can have more than one parameter passed in. You just put them in a comma separated list. So I could have 3, 4, 5, just put as many as I want in. In this case, I only need 2. From that, I compute the circumference of the tire using pi. That's in inches. I convert that circumference over to miles. So I'm computing the circumference in miles because V is in miles per hour. And notice that this is a trick that I used before back here, where I had y equals y plus s. You can define y in terms of what y already is. And similarly, here, I'm defining c in terms of what c already is. And that's okay to do that. C, in this case, on the right-hand side, is the circumference in inches. And then we divide by 12 inches, and there's 5,280 feet in a mile. And so we convert from inches over to, this will now be c in the number of miles. Having done that, once we have the circumference in miles, we simply take the velocity, divide it by the circumference, and that gives us the number of rotations. And so we're going to print off the circumference equals and the number of rotations equals. This kind of print inside a procedure can be handy. If you get a bug in your program, one of the first things you should do is start printing off different computations that you've made to make sure that they are doing the right thing. So, number of tire rotations. How many do we get? Do we have, here we go, using more than one parameter, and we're going to run that. So, the circumference of the tire turns out to be quite small, but it looks like we're doing 77,000 tire rotations in an hour for a 17-inch tire on a car. Okay, so 2 lessons here. One is you can use as many different parameters for a procedure as you want, and 2, very important, the idea of local versus global parameters.